Hello. Today, you will hear a story with an interesting plot. I decided not to celebrate my 50th birthday at work. I was going to be retired anyway without too much ado. I gathered my closest associates in my office. We drank a couple of bottles of whiskey and had a snack. We sat and talked, and at about 8 o'clock in the evening, we went home. I called a cab because I was well drunk and went home too. I did not enter into a debate with my wife. Did not make any demands. I simply undressed and went to sleep in the hall. The next day, the head of the department called me and gave me a pension certificate and a box with a tea set as a memorable gift to a pensioner. Well, don't be offended. The chief tried to be supportive. It was a decision made there. He moved his chin to the ceiling, giving to understand that the decision about my retirement was taken at the very top and nothing depended on him personally. Yes. Even if it depended, you would have done nothing. I thought but did not say anything out loud. I shook the sweaty palm of the man who trained me and went to the exit. Yuri hand over to a new employee in the voice of my former boss sounded begging tones. Alas, I would with all my heart, but catastrophically no time. Going fishing. Without turning around, I said and carefully closed the door behind me. This phase of life was over for me. I loaded a box with my belongings into the trunk, put the tea set on the seat and sat behind the steering wheel of my SUV. I had nowhere else to hurry. I decided to drop these off at my and my wife's country house and drive to the city apartment to change, especially since my wife was supposed to go there after work. I said our country house, but it belonged more to my wife since she was the one who made most of the money for our family. We got married quite early when we were still students. Sweta was in her 4th year of law school, and I graduated from the Polytechnic Department of Radio Engineering. We were 1 year apart in age, which gave good prospects for our family. As it usually happens, our first child, our son, was born exactly 9 months after our wedding. We named him Dima. 4 years later, our daughter, Moshe, was born. My parents and hers helped us raise our children. After graduation, I served 2 years in the army, and then I was transferred to a company where I worked in my institute specialty. Sweta went into law. She specialized in business law and handled mostly bankruptcy cases. She soon separated from her native company and went into solo practice. 10 years later, Sweta became the owner of thriving law firm, which was entrusted to handle their tangled cases of rich and famous businessmen. As time went by, Sweta was earning fame and credibility in our city. I remained in the shadow of my wife. I must say that it didn't bother me much. She tried not to drag me to social events, knowing that these parties I did not like. I preferred hunting and a little fishing. The fact that I didn't hang out with Sveriter didn't mean I didn't keep track of my wife. I must say that Sveriter was quite an attractive woman with beautiful legs and a tight little ass. Some men were jumping out of their pants, trying to lure her into their nets. But Sveriter stood firm on the guard of family values. At least I had no reason to suspect her of treason. I was sure of her. Finally, the children have grown up. My son got married and moved to the capital. On the way was a grandson. My daughter graduated from university and also lived separately. We sighed more freely. Just by that time, Sveriter had built a large country house and we breathed fresh air almost all year round, which was not spoiled by city stench. It was to this cottage that I headed. When I pulled up to the house, I saw my wife's car parked in the driveway. I was even more surprised since Vita had to be at work. Well, plans might have changed after all. I leisurely went up to the 2nd floor carrying boxes of junk in my hands. I carefully put them in my office and was about to go down to the car. But my attention was caught by strange noises coming from the guest bedroom at the end of the hall. I was more surprised than alarmed. I walked to the loosely closed door and listened. There were painfully familiar noises coming from behind the door. It was the sound of my suite of screaming during the last phase of lovemaking. After so many years of married life, I understood and knew every moan she made. But the voice that belonged to the second character was not familiar to me. My wife cried out in a voice tone with passion. "Do you feel good with me?" "Yes. Yes. You're the best. Better than a husband," passionately answered Sverrir. And so on. For some reason, it made me laugh. Funny and bitter. My wife, a successful and respectable woman, mother of 2 children, grandmother of 5, was calling herself the whore of some scoundrel. The times, the manners. When they started up their ruckus again, I opened the door. A few minutes passed while Sweeter took a sideways glimpse of my motionless frozen figure. She pushed her playmate away and stared at me in surprise. A lover definitely crawled under the sheet and fell silent, pretending to be a hose. Sweeta jumped down to the floor and headed toward me as if nothing had happened. I looked at her naked figure and a lump began to roll up in my throat. "Yura, do not make a scene. Go to town. We'll talk in the evening." She told me this in such a calm voice, as if she was sending me to the store for potatoes. I expected tears, sobbing remorse. And here was a calm, even emotionless voice. "Talk to you later." I stood there for a while as if in a stupor. I could have nailed her lover. Believe me, I wouldn't have had much trouble doing that. Throw the cheating wife out of the house. Chase her around the yard screaming for the neighbors' amusement. But in my mind were her words spoken during a period of passion. "You're better than a husband." And that was a verdict. A verdict on our family. That's not forgivable. I stared into her indifferent eyes for a while. Then I gritted through my teeth. "At least cover up, bitch." I turned and walked out. What a coincidence. I almost simultaneously lost my job and my wife. The fact that Sverrir for me is already past, I had no doubt. I was not hysterical. I did not ask why, not sobbing, frantically hugging the pillow. I took the blow of fate upon myself. The only thing I had to do was gather my thoughts. And the first thing to do was to solve the housing problem. Technically, I had 1/4 of an apartment and a country house, but I knew perfectly well that my wife's lawyers would leave me nothing. And I would still owe them. By the way, the car is also registered to Sverrir. I looked at my watch. 1 o'clock. It's time. I pulled over to the curb and took out my smartphone. This had caught my eye right away. Lakeside home for sale, quiet, peaceful place, great fishing and hunting, and the price quite affordable for me. I dialed the contact number listed in the ad. A woman answered. She told me that this house was built by her father when he returned from the seas. He lived there until his death. The house stood empty for almost a year until the new owner decided to sell it after all. The house stands deep in the woods. Around for tens of kilometers of thick forest. Not everyone would dare to live in such a remote place. So time after time, the price of the house had to be reduced. I was fine with it. I offered her a little more, but asked to draw up a deed of gift for me. I was still married and did not want to risk it. An hour later, we met at the notary's and executed the contract. I had just bought my own country house. She told me where the key to the front door was, said goodbye to me, got into a cab and drove away. Wasting no time, I arrived at the apartment and started packing. Several times, Peter called. I did not pick up the phone. Then text messages started pouring in. "Where are you? I'm worried. Euro, we need to talk." But I wasn't paying attention to them anymore. After gathering my things, I called a cab. I threw the keys to the apartment and the car into the mailbox. I took a cab to the garage. My father's car was as good as new and running. I threw my backpack and a large bag in the trunk, warmed up the engine.